Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anand Krishnan, and welcome to the second half of the discussions at AISS 2021. Today, the panel discussion at hand is Data Governance Strategy Program and its benefits. We have a very distinguished panel to slice and dice and get to the bottom of what data governance strategy is. Introducing first Ms. Ines Herbosch, Chief Data Officer at FOD Justi, SPF Justice.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Good afternoon. Akshay Garkel, Partner and Leader, Cyber Grant Thornton. Ms. Veena Vinod, Regional DPO, APEC, Franklin Templeton.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning.
Mr. Marlon Dominguez, DPO, Erasmus University, Rotterdam. We would also have another speaker joining the discussion, Ms. Anupama Narayanan, AVP, Standard Chartered Bank, working in the area of data and privacy transformation. Hi, Anupama.
Hello.
While Marlon is joining us, it would be great if we can have a short round of introductions. I believe Marlon is here. Hello, Marlon. Handing it over to you to take the discussion forward. Can you hear me, Marlon? Okay, while we sort that out, I thought we could maybe go with Veena Vinod, if you would want to sort of give a short introduction and also specific areas that you'd like to focus on in the talk.
Yeah, I think Marlon is back. Anyhow, before we start off, I'm Veena, having an overall experience of 20 years in various industries. Started as a lawyer, litigation lawyer, and coming from a legal background. Of late, been passionate about information security, data privacy, and how it spans over various industries and what are the challenges and learning opportunities there. Currently leading one of the asset management organization as a regional DPO, leading all privacy-centric operations implementation projects in Asia Pacific region, and happy to be part of this particular session. Thank you.
Great. I think we have Marlon now. Marlon, if you could take the discussion forward. Marlon, we can't hear you. Yeah, I think that should fix it. So while we figure this out, it'd be great if we can have our first round of interventions. If we can go to Ines next for her initial remarks.
Yeah, first of all, indeed, good afternoon and good morning for people in Europe. I want to make sure first that you know what's my perspective in total. I have more like a business background. That's very handy to know because that's how tackle data governance. So I'm actually a specialist in data governance, data management and data strategy, but also in marketing automation and profiling. I'm also a data protection officer, not right now in my function. I'm actually guiding the teams towards a more data-driven organization. So I'm responsible for the source data, and meaning working on data governance, data management, and the data strategy, but also for BI. So actually also working on the next layer, at the report analytic layer. And the ideal situation is, of course, that they are very well synchronized and that we are working very closely together between those two layers. So, but maybe Marlon, I don't know if you managed it right now. No, not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, my apologies for the technical difficulties. It happens sometimes when accessing through corporate networks. If you can keep the the initial interventions going, that would be really nice.
Okay. So maybe we can start already with the first. I think Annapurna, you normally would first start with the first subject.
Yeah.
Annapurna.
So, hey, hello everyone. First off, thanks for this opportunity. Am I audible?
Yeah, audible, but your video is not stable here.
Yeah.
Just quickly log back out.
Anupama, you
Yeah.
may try to switch off your video, please.
Yeah, I'll do that, yeah. Yeah.
No, only a couple of us are very stable in video and
Yeah.
voice indeed. So,
It seems to be an unstable connection, but I
Unstable
think
connection.
we can sort of move on into
yeah,
the
but
other speakers. If you can go to
Yeah.
Veena for your
Yeah,
intervention.
yeah. So, okay, so I'll just start off with what the topic for discussion is today. From first, the first topic or subtopic that we are considering today for the discussion, which is, what are the strategies, governance strategies that an organization really would want to look at? Is there one size fit all kind of an approach? And what are the privacy governance with a focus on collaboration with third parties in which organization participates? So these are the main points that we'll be touching upon in the first subtopic. I think Anupama is back, and Anupama, you can just take it from there. Then I'll follow. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So today we want to talk about data governance strategy and as a program, its benefits, right? I would like to start off with data strategy from two perspectives, offensive and defensive, right? So data defense typically deals with compliance, with regulation, with policy, organizational policies and standards, preventing fraud loss, preventing theft, a very defensive approach. Then on the other hand, we have data offense strategy, which is all about using data to make business decisions, driving up your profits, your revenue streams, driving customer satisfaction, all of this. And any organization needs to make a trade-off between the two. And I think there are really 5 key drivers to decide which part of the spectrum one wants to operate in. One is obviously alignment with the the overall corporate strategy. Two is the industry an organization is in and the extent of regulation in it. Like for instance, retail is not as heavily regulated as say banking, as banks or hospitals are. So that's another driver. Third is the organization's own data maturity, data management and its maturity. Fourth is obviously competition and their capabilities and maturity levels. And fifth becomes the size of the sizing of the budget, data budget, and the people allocated to that effort. So all of these, as with any strategy, you need to look within, outside, and all of these will shape the data strategy. Um, now, said that, the one comforting thing is, yeah, you're on, Marlon.
You can keep going,
Yeah.
Anupama.
So, all right. So, yeah. So the one comforting thing that I'd like to call out is, once a strategy is picked, it's not necessary that an organization needs to stick with it. It will evolve over time, and it's possible to keep moving. Usually, organizations pick a defensive strategy and then move towards offense. The reverse is a little difficult, and it's also rare. Um, and I think striking the right balance between the controls and the flexibility between the two models becomes important. As somebody who spent a lot of time in the banking industry, I would like to touch a little bit upon open banking. I think Brazil today announced how its final stage of going live with open banking regulation is passed, and usually there is a country flavor to this whole model, which opens up a world of possibilities, right? And there are various ecosystem participants. So there is a need for regulating open banking. Because we don't want the ecosystem to shift unduly in favor of one of the participants. So let me call out who the participants are. Obviously, there are the account providers, there are the traditional banks, and then there are fintechs or other financial service providers. Then there are the customers, consumers, and probably technology service providers. So the ecosystem shouldn't shift unduly in favor of one participant, and consent management needs to be at the heart of open banking. Who has access to the data for how long, after the purpose is met, ensuring that the data is purged, all of it, the entire data lifecycle management becomes important when architecting an open banking ecosystem or a solution around it. So, and the second need for regulation from a privacy standpoint is, customer data at the heart of it all, is the bedrock on which this whole open data, open banking ecosystem is built. So that's another reason why there is regulation everywhere. If you look at the UK, there's the Payment Service Directive 2. In India, late November 2019, there was account aggregator specs that were published. And I think, like I said, in Brazil today, they announced their fourth stage of open finance. So it needs to be tightly regulated. I want to touch upon it because it's a phenomenon to watch out for in the banking industry, and it needs to have security and privacy by design embedded as it gets implemented. Um, so with that, I think I'll pause for some of the views from either the moderator or my co-panelists.
So, thank you so much. And for the sake of time, Veena, could you please reflect on this topic also from your experience?
Sure, Malan, thank you. While Anupama touched on the requirement of data storage or data purging, and I would take my cue from there and speak a little bit about how there is an overlap of the data retention requirement from various industry or regulatory standpoint, and also how a data governance strategy could be impacted, or a new challenge that could be coming into the picture after enforcement of various data protection law across the globe. And we all know that today businesses are not within the national boundaries. Most of them are globally placed and with various geographical, cultural, economic differences. And this actually calls for different or very diverse kind of data retention strategies that need to be applied for. See, generally, it is categorized into four from a general purpose regulation standpoint, like looking at trade or tax regulations, etc. Data retention may be required. Then domain specific, like you have GDPR or PCI DSS, or certain specific HIPAA, maybe which is very domain specific kind of law regulation that binds for a certain amount of data retention. Then we have international standards like ISO certifications. I mean, what they stand, certain frameworks that calls out for certain type of data retention and the timelines for certain such data retention, and also certain internal policies or guidelines of the organization impact the data retention. So in these light of various requirement from a data retention point of view, can an organization in the given scenario create one standardized policy or a framework that binds all the requirement is a challenge, specifically after the implementation of data privacy laws. Because at one part, while we look at how the data privacy law across the globe after GDPR is placed as data minimization, risk associated to that need to be minimized, and the data need to be deleted once the purpose accomplishment is done or completed. And that actually, and every aspect of the data life cycle need to be checked and reviewed, revised, and see that no element of data is available in a particular system beyond a certain period of time. But if we have to provide an example here, I mean, I just take a very easy example like HR department. If you look at an HR function within an organization, uh, HR has a lot of categories of data, like from candidature data to the employee data to the benefits data to the payroll data, etc. So these are all data, I mean, exit data, etc. So you have a various categorization of data that requires different type of data retention. Has After the data protection law, has the organization sat together to look at a robust layering of a data governance strategy? It need to be ever evolving. Data governance need to be ever evolving, because I implemented as an organization way back in 2018 when the GDPR was implemented. Do I need to progress it with the current regional specific law? That should be one of the area that all the organizations should have, should be looking at. And so that becomes a challenge. But however, the flexible framework of or the flexible way of the organization's vision on data governance will help in creating some kind of friendly approach in streamlining the data retention policies within the organization. So if I say a candidature data need not sit within the system beyond 1 year or 2 year, it may be different in various regions. Internally, we need to create a policy or a standard that, see, across the globe where our presences are available, we will retain the candidature data maybe a midway, like 13 months or 1 month, 1 year, up to 1 year or something like that. So that kind of a standardization will help in reducing the risk that is associated with data retention or storage, and that will actually give a better quality of data within the organization, so that while we use the data, it is very clear and it is purposeful that we are using those data for a better business intelligence or better way of availability within the organization itself. So it purpose is met with the quality of data that we are providing. So that would be my area, but I'm open to any questions that are related with from my co-panelist or anyone.
Thank you so much, Veena. So, Akshay, on the organizational governance strategy, what is your take?
Sure. Thank you, Marlon. And just, I think very diverse and fantastic perspectives coming in from Anupama and Veena. One on the open banking and the second on the typical lenses that one can apply on data. My perspective here is, and before I actually answer the question, Marlon, I'd like to just give some context. That today, the way we basically been seeing businesses move, I think we're living in a transformation age, and I think the transformation is still on. As they say, data is the new oil, or the new gold, or maybe I don't know whether it's the right term to use, but is data the new crypto, right? And then from that perspective, organizations are really, really striving to kind of make sure that they make meaningful intelligence out of the data, and then put it to the right use for the organization in terms of either compliance purposes or in terms of the growth purposes that essentially businesses are embarking on. uh, in addition to that, we've also seen certain transformation initiatives in the form of extended enterprise. Today, we've got information which does not reside within the organization alone, but is available with our ecosystem partners. There are different models on which data is accessed. There are different platforms through which data is accessed. For example, cloud service providers, right? And also information basically being available with our end customers, right? From that perspective, it makes sense to first understand what is essentially the overall strategy and the business need of the organization, and then essentially have my data governance strategy to be completely aligned to the organization's overall strategy. Now, some of the areas that one could typically look into framework, and today we have a lot of frameworks which are available. NIST has defined something, the Data Governance Institute has defined something. However, it would make sense to at least cover these areas in the strategy or the framework. Organizations have also embarked on the journey of customizing their frameworks and building a common master. So from that perspective, understand what is the problem statement that you're really trying to address. Uh, what sort of data essentially is being utilized and what sort of data is being processed. Again, what's the impact of losing that data to overall business, right? Because today there is also a cost attached to it in terms of the kind of controls that one basically applies across the environment. So, can I take a risk based approach here and essentially say that, okay, these are some of the important areas, these are certain confinements, and this is where I would like to kind of, segregate my data and then essentially act on it in terms of applying various metrics in terms of either access controls, the data lifecycle, and then, of course, the storage. And I'll explain why I say that as well. Some of the models that could be applied, and there couldn't be one size that fits all, because there would be some older businesses which essentially are running legacy systems, and they have a certain format in which the data is being run. So those are certain I would say limitations in business which also essentially have to be taken into consideration. And then, of course, the overall outcome in terms of how beneficial is it for me to kind of apply controls, and how many controls do I really need to apply to my framework, and who is responsible, because I think the responsibility matrix also calls for data stewards, calls for data protection officers, and so on and so forth, which again businesses are adopting. And last but not the least is the privacy. And I think Veena did speak about the consent. Sorry, Anupama spoke about consent, and Veena spoke about deletion of data. And I think that's where, when you look at the laws like the California Privacy Act, or you look at GDPR, and now within India we have the Indian Data Protection Bill, which is essentially being tabled in the Parliament. We definitely would like to understand the right to forget. And when you say right to forget, it is all about giving a confirmation to the PII holder that I have actually forgotten your information within my environment, to the last mile, apart from any of the legal purposes, like in terms of retaining that information for future purposes to the law enforcement agencies, and so on and so forth. So I would say these are some of the aspects that essentially will cover from overall data governance framework perspective.
Yeah.
Back to you, Marlon.
Thank you. So now actually implementing and frameworks and best practices. Ines, could I start with you? What are your best practices and lessons learned there?
Oh, a lot of lessons learned, of course. But first of all, I didn't tackle it yet, Marlon. But something that I really want to say is actually, I don't like the term data governance. Sorry for that, guys. I really spoiled the title now for this panel. But actually, a couple of years ago, I've changed it into data excellence, because it's more about what do we want to achieve in the end. And it's excellent data that we want to achieve. I don't care in the end how they tackle data by governing. When you're going to the business and you will say, I will implement data governance, they are already reluctant because they don't like the word governance. Even I'm working for the federal government. It's even over there an issue. So excellent data is just the mindset already that you have. Now, saying that, just that you know that according to business terms, it's always handy that you know where I'm saying, and I'm already brainwashed, of course, into data excellence so that you know what I mean. Now, I always start with a high level indeed, and my co-speakers already mentioned it. I always start with a high level data strategy that is linked to the organizational strategy. They really need to be aligned, and then you already feel the level of data maturity in the organization. You get a notice about that, and then you can also indicate the main drivers, because data excellence is quite broad. The sky is the limit in the end. So your main drivers indicate actually the reason why. Why should you put all this effort in such kind of program? Because it costs a lot of money and effort, of course. So indicating your main drivers, it makes already a very clear goal. Why should you do? Now, when we start with this framework, I always do it with a pragmatic approach, a step-by-step approach. I don't know if you know it, the good enough and out, safe enough to try principle. I really love that. My people as well, I hope they do, I think. But that's a very clear thing to do, because then you deliver actually something every week, even every day. And that's something that the organization really wants to see. They don't want to see something within 2 years. They want to see something right now, even on one particular data set already. So that's something very important for the mindset in the organization. And besides that, we all know that we can't put up on a framework without a business. That's by default, you really need them. So first of all, listen very good to the business. And I mean, really listen. What are the issues every day? How they tackle data? When are the data consumer? When are they the data producer, for instance? But what are the needs in the business? And second, indeed, actually already mentioned it, indicate already roles and responsibilities to make sure that they indicate together with you some use cases. They really make sense, widespread all over the organization. You don't want to make one department happy. You want to make everyone happy in the end. And that's the whole purpose. And take them along with you on the journey. And then you can build up your data domain heat map and your critical data elements step by step. And so that are actually the first steps to make sure that your data governance or data excellence framework in this case is very stable and fundamental for the next coming years. So, voilà.
Thank you. Very, very enlightening. Anupama, could you say something about, from your point of view, think about benchmarking?
Sure, Marlon. So, as somebody who works a lot in the CDO, I can tell you that I think identifying critical elements of the data governance framework, what are the key categories that are important to an organization? Like, for example, data lineage, building your business metadata, your technical metadata, having a data catalog, ideally an AI/ML driven catalog, your operating model, and stakeholder adoption. So identify those key categories and do a benchmarking exercise periodically, say once in a year, at least once in 2 years with your peers in the industry on each of these categories. A simple red, amber, green to see where you stand vis-a-vis your peers is quite helpful. Said that, I think having a core assessment framework and having a capability score against all of those key elements, and also an automation score, given the need for your tooling to be right and to be effective, having a automation score and a capability score against all of these elements also gives an indicator on what as an organization, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Then the other point that I want to cover is have a target state identified as your North Star, so that you as an organization know that in your data governance program, you're surely but steadily marching towards that. And talking about target state, I think one of the classic problems that I've seen in every bank, nearly every bank that I've worked in, is whether to approach it in a whether to make data management centralized or the treatment federated. And each obviously has its pros and cons. And I can speak from my experience that a centralized program is probably relatively easier to implement, but uptake, there might be a little bit of it may not be as good as the others, only because the data, while you have established a single source of truth and you think the centralized framework has high quality granular data easy to access, it may need to undergo a lot of transformation before a certain business unit can actually use it to make decisions. So, whereas in a federated model, there are too many touch points, and we can create a very fragmented landscape, right? So, my recommendation would be to go in for a unified approach where you get the basics right around building, like I said, your business metadata, your technical metadata, have your hygiene taken care of, you have your foundational capabilities built, and then probably have a unified layer on top, a visualization layer or whatever you want to call it, which will help with the consumption. So the rest of your organization, your business or your customers can come seamlessly to the unified layer and easily consume data as a service. We could call it that even. So a unified approach is my recommendation to getting this model around data management right.
Thanks so much. So, Akshay, on from your point of view, I think you want to address maturity models and new roles for existing functions.
Sure. Uh, again, I will take a cue from what Anupama mentioned in terms of the target state, right? So today, if we have just started on a journey essentially of looking at data, and looking at building frameworks, obviously, you cannot expect an organization to be at the optimized stage, right? So from that perspective, you know, um, uh, I think one is the scorecarding. The second is actually doing a quantitative analysis on the maturity map,
Yeah.
and that essentially comes with a lot of factors, as I highlighted in my earlier perspective in terms of what are the criterias that would entail while building a framework. But essentially, we've seen CMM level, we've seen various other standards who basically define the maturity map. But of course, every organization have their own way of looking at it. But what is really really important is to how we could basically quantify it. How do we apply the relevant weightages? Because what would be really important in organization A may not be important in organization B, and vice versa. So applying the weightages is very important, and then basically aligning the controls and basically evaluating whether the outcome of that particular control in terms of its operating effectiveness is aligned and based on the metric. Now obviously there are various scoring methodologies which can be applied. In addition to that, a fair degree of automation also can be applied in terms of looking at a performance of a specific data control in real time, and essentially how right up to the board levels could get a real time view in terms of the health state of the organization for that specific maturity. Now, if you look at various levels of maturity, you talk about something on an ad hoc basis, you talk about defined, embedded, optimized, and so on and so forth. Now, organizations can actually define that desired level of maturity as well. So, for example, in the next 2 years, from ad hoc, I would want to go into a developing stage. I may not want to really hit the optimized stage, depending on my business model. We've actually seen some organizations in the past, who've essentially gone into a very lightweight model. They have actually reduced the ecosystem partners, and then they have gone into digital shelving. The digital shelving is nothing but where they've actually displayed their products on the likes of Amazon, Flipkarts of the world, and they run their businesses through that model. Just an example to basically give. There again, the maturity map would be very defined, and again, it would not be directly comparable to their peers in the industry, right? So again, as rightly pointed out, one size doesn't fit all. I also spoke about something called as data stewards. You may not want to go in for a DPO right up front till the time the regulation doesn't call for it, and you could start with data stewards and then essentially move to DPOs, right? Or the chief data officer, so be it. So those are some of the examples that I can basically give where you could start from a data management journey and then essentially move forward to the matured stage. just with citing some of the examples that I gave. Back to you, Marvin.
Thank you. I think we have something like 5 minutes left. Veena, would you please reflect on this, and then perhaps everyone a short statement on the governance of data itself. So Veena?
Yeah, truly. Thank you, Marlon. So I would actually, also add to what Akshay has pointed out, and Anupama also rightly called out here, with regard to having a very streamlined strategy that an organization adopts. Along with, I would also want to, maybe like ownership of the data. Each function or each department, whoever owns their respective data, need to be clearly understanding that who can take what action about a certain data that rests with them at what point of time, using what method, and how it could be cured, to see that the entire organization requirement from a data intelligence or the data purity helps in right decision making. So that is one of the points that I believe also will add to a right governance strategy for any organization. Again, as Akshay said, there is no one size fit all. There are, for a financial industry, and various complex vendors sitting across the globe, you may have a very complex and diverse kind of data assets and data ownership that we are looking at. But clearly streamlining that and bringing that under one umbrella, and having a right line of reporting, etc., would help in maximizing the data values that are sitting within the organization. That would be my take on this. Back to you, Marlon.
Thank you. So Anupama, could you have a share your short statement on data governance?
Yeah, sure. So, while in any organization, I think a CDO formulates and executes the strategy. I think setting the tone from the top, a buy-in from all the entire C-suite and the CEO, accountability at that level, and then driving it across the organization becomes important. And I think getting your second line of defense as well as your business functions, all of them on board on the program, is critical to the success of a data governance program. And very briefly, I think I would just like to touch upon, as many organizations are looking at modernizing data governance, one of the hot new areas that I'm working on is data discovery and classification. About 80% of an analyst's time today is spent in just discovering data and prepping data. So there are cutting edge AI ML based tools in the market which can be used to drive discovery, classification, and data taxonomy. And I would highly recommend that organizations check it out.
Thank you. Ines, I think you will have the last word. Could you share with us your final recommendations on excellent data governance?
That's nice that I have the last word. No, actually, the biggest challenge indeed that we have is the fact that data is a responsibility of the business. So please indeed take them together with you, them on the complete journey from the start already. Make also the roles and responsibilities fit for your organization. Is it a data steward or a data ambassador, or the responsibilities that are different? I don't care in the end, as long as they really understand what they need to do in the end. And for instance, according to that, I always like the ATKAR principle, a change and a communication plan that's completely like a tailor-made plan for them. And the questioning, always question yourself, because the business will, what's in it for me? And if you know that answer for every function, and I really mean it, for every function in your organization, then it's clear, and they will jump on your train, on your journey, and they will work together with you, and your journey will be a lot easier than you think about in the first stage. So keep that in mind, especially that the roles and responsibilities are actually the fundamental thing that you need to make sure that it's in place. Amen to that.
Thank you so much. So I think with this, there's a lot of take-home messages here. Very much thanks to the panelists for sharing your expertise and your insights, and thank you very much for bringing this to the next level together. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
all.
much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Pleasure
all.
interacting. Thank you.
Bye.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Absolutely.